COVID restrictions have made fishing a challenge on the Deadliest Catch. But what if you get it? Captain Keith Colburn recently shared that he has been dealing with COVID, and he says that it is real. On Friday, Deadliest Catch F/V Wizard Captain Keith Colburn went to social media to share some serious news. He has been hospitalized for over 1 week with serious COVID and COVID-related pneumonia. He is doing his own PSA to encourage fans of the Discovery show to get their vaccine. In a Twitter post that had the caption, "In the video, Colburn says, 'I'm on day 8 in the hospital. I had done a 10-day quarantine without any kind of medication in a foreign country. So I am working on 19 to 20 days now that I've had COVID.'" He then continued, "I am over the COVID. I believe I've got the antibodies now in my system naturally. But I am battling the remnants of pneumonia." Captain Keith's voice then strengthened as he declared, "All I can say is this. COVID is real next." Captain Keith dished out some advice. Get the vaccine. Then added, "It is better than spending 20 days of your life in a hospital and barely been able to breathe." Lastly, Keith thanked fans and signed off. He did not share many more details. However, he was hooked up to air, and although he showed his usual Captain Keith figure, it is clear he has been battling hard. Moreover, this is a guy who works the deadliest job in the world, but the coronavirus pandemic knocked him down. Back in February, Deadliest Catch captains Josh Harris and Sig Hansen starred in a new mask PSA. This was in cooperation between the CDC and Discovery. Both captains asked people to mask up and practice social distancing. Captain Sig said, "We have one of the most dangerous jobs on the planet, but right now, it's dangerous everywhere." In addition, the fleets had to all be very careful about COVID. For example, there is a mandatory 14-day quarantine for the entire fleet. If they ever should leave their crab boats, everyone must wear masks. Otherwise, there are hefty fines for anyone not following these rules. However, despite these cautions, Captain Keith was severely struck down with COVID-19. COVID plays a huge part of the new season. One of the biggest issues is that the crab survey conducted during the summer by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game didn't happen because of COVID-19. Discovery explained that the captains will be fishing blind with no charts or guidance on where to find crab on the grounds, making an already challenging season even more difficult. Deadliest Catch will air on April 20 on the Discovery Channel on Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Meanwhile, Discovery Plus viewers will get episodes 1 week early. It is currently streaming commercial-free. Georgia Macchiatello has several decades of writing experience, including travel writing, tech writing, art history analysis, and now entertainment writing. She loves to share the latest news on rom-coms and mysteries. Deadliest Catch's Keith Colburn shares scary COVID story. Keith Colburn, the seasoned captain of the Wizard on Discovery Channel's Deadliest Catch, has braved some of the most perilous waters in the world. From massive swells to freezing temperatures, navigating the Bering Sea is no easy feat. But as Colburn recently shared, one of the scariest and most uncertain moments of his life came not from a rogue wave or a sudden storm, but from a tiny, invisible virus, COVID-19. Colburn's journey with the virus began in the winter of 2020, as the global pandemic was sweeping across the globe. In an exclusive interview, the renowned crab fisherman opened up about his battle with COVID-19, how it impacted his career, and the lessons he learned along the way. The calm before the storm in early 2020, the Wizard was preparing for another season of crab fishing in the Bering Sea. The pandemic was already making headlines, but like many others, Colburn and his crew had yet to fully grasp the magnitude of what was about to unfold. I remember hearing about COVID in the news, but at that point, we were all just kind of going about our business. It wasn't in our face yet, Colburn recalls. As a seasoned captain, Colburn had seen his fair share of rough seasons, but nothing could have prepared him for how COVID would impact his life and career. You're always prepared for the storms, the bad weather, and the dangerous conditions on the water. But this was something different, something we couldn't see, we couldn't prepare for. The uncertainty was terrifying. The initial weeks of the pandemic were filled with confusion and disorientation. As the virus spread, so too did the fear and anxiety surrounding it. Colburn's life was about to change in ways he never expected. The first signs. Symptoms and shock. The first symptoms appeared just days before Colburn was set to head out on the Wizard for another season of crabbing. At first, it was just a mild cough and some fatigue, nothing that seemed too out of the ordinary. Colburn says, I didn't think much of it at first. But when the symptoms lingered and began to worsen, Colburn's concern grew. He was aware of the severity of COVID, having heard horror stories from other parts of the world, but he never imagined that he would be affected in such a personal way. I started to feel worse and worse. My chest felt tight. I was having trouble breathing, and I was exhausted all the time. That's when I started to get scared. I knew something was really wrong. Colburn quickly got tested, and when the results came back positive, it was a shock that hit him like a ton of bricks. I was in disbelief, Colburn admits. I had been taking precautions. We all thought that if we just followed the guidelines, we'd be okay. But COVID is unpredictable. It doesn't care who you are or how careful you've been. Isolation and the uncertainty. Once Colburn tested positive, he had to isolate, which posed an entirely new set of challenges. For a man who spends most of his time surrounded by his crew, being isolated from everyone was a difficult adjustment. I spent years living with my crew, sharing everything: meals, cramped quarters, long hours on the water. And suddenly, I was alone in my own house, in isolation, with only my thoughts and the virus for company. The fear and uncertainty were overwhelming. While Colburn was relatively healthy and had no underlying conditions, he had seen firsthand how quickly the virus could turn deadly. His mind raced with worst-case scenarios. I kept thinking, what if this is the thing that takes me down? What if I end up in the hospital on a ventilator? What if I never make it back out on the water again? Colburn says, the gravity of the situation still evident in his voice. During this time, he faced not just physical isolation, but also the mental toll of being away from the Wizard and his crew. It was hard to keep my mind occupied, he admits. I couldn't focus on much beyond my health, and I just kept thinking about what was happening to my crew, and what would happen to the season if I wasn't able to get better. It was a strange dichotomy. On the one hand, Colburn was determined to recover so he could return to the sea, but on the other hand, he was also terrified of what his recovery might look like. The battle for recovery. The battle with COVID was grueling. Colburn describes the fatigue as being unlike anything he'd ever experienced. I've been through some pretty rough conditions in the Bering Sea, but nothing compared to the exhaustion and brain fog that came with COVID. It felt like every day was a struggle to get through, he recalls. His breathing difficulties were particularly alarming. I would go from having a normal conversation to feeling like I couldn't catch my breath, Colburn explains. There were moments when I thought I might pass out just walking around my house. I was scared, not just for my health, but for the future. For a man used to commanding a 155-foot fishing vessel in some of the most dangerous waters in the world, this new battle was humbling. Colburn had to lean on his strength and resilience in ways he never had before, but he also had to learn to be patient with himself. "I've always been the one who leads the crew, who's strong and decisive," he says. "But COVID humbled me. I had to learn to listen to my body, to rest when I needed to, and to not push myself too hard." After several weeks of rest, gradual improvement, and a lot of mental and physical endurance, Colburn finally began to recover. His strength returned slowly, and as his symptoms subsided, he could feel the fog lifting. "I started feeling like myself again, but it took time, and the fear of relapse was always there." Rejoining the crew in Colburn was finally cleared to return to the Wizard. The emotional and physical journey had taken its toll. "The first time I stepped back on the boat, I felt like a different person. I was just so grateful to be back, but also humbled by everything that had happened," Colburn says. "We're a family on that boat. I didn't realize how much I had missed my crew until I was away from them." Rejoining the crew wasn't just about physical recovery. Colburn also had to rebuild his confidence. When you're in command, there's no room for doubt. You have to be strong for everyone around you. "But after COVID, I wasn't sure if I was going to be the same person I was before," he admits. "It took time, but I found my rhythm again." Though he was physically recovered, the psychological impact of the virus lingered. "I think COVID changed all of us," Colburn reflects. "It made us all more aware of the fragility of life, but it also reminded us that we're stronger than we think, and we can get through even the toughest challenges." Lessons learned. Looking back on the experience, Colburn has gained a new perspective on life, health, and resilience. "The biggest lesson I learned is that you can't take anything for granted. Health, time with family,